I'm Jahnavi, and like Melissa said, my talk is called The Invisible Blame Game. So let's start off with a little bit of a Q&A, get warmed up. How many of you guys would say in the past 6 months that you've procrastinated?
I have.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, everybody! Alright, so on top of that, how many of you guys would say that you are a chronic procrastinator? By that I mean, yeah, already, okay, great. So for all of you, this is going to be particularly relevant. So we're going to talk a little bit today about why people as chronic procrastinators and procrastinators in general find it so hard to stop procrastinating. But before we talk about that, we're going to have to go into why we procrastinate as people and how we procrastinate. So there are two main emotions that dictate the action of procrastination, and that's fear and boredom. Under each of those emotions, there are 3 subcategories each of different types of procrastination that we can relate it to them. With fear, the first is skill deficiency related procrastination, which is when you feel like you don't have the skill to complete the task. If you don't know how to do something, you're going to push it off, and by some magic miracle, you're going to learn how to do it. It never happens. Then there's fear of failure. That's the kind of procrastination when you think you're just going to mess something up. You're going to do it wrong, so you just don't do it. Then there's fear of success, which seems kind of counterintuitive. Let's say that you had a teacher who gave you a test, and you got 100 on that test. Good job, you! The next time you take the test, you realize that because you got 100 last time, they're going to expect you to do well on this one. But by that pressure of having to do well again, you're afraid that you're not going to be able to succeed or to surpass your previous successes. Then you push things off because you don't want to deal with that fear. That's fear of success-related procrastination. Under boredom, there are 3 more. The first is lack of motivation. So maybe you like a subject. Let's say you like U.S. history. But you can't motivate yourself to take those notes because they're horrible. They're terrible, terrible, terrible notes. So that's lack of motivation. Then there's lack of interest. That was me in math last year. I hated that class with every fiber of my being. I was not interested in it, so I didn't do well. I didn't do my work. That's lack of interest. And then there's division of interest. So that's when you have so many things on your plate all at once that you kind of pick and choose which ones you're going to focus on, and everything else just gets pushed to the side. You forget about it, and then it just doesn't get done. So those are the kind of ways that are typical of people to procrastinate. Now to how we procrastinate. I'm sure you all recognize many of the symbols up here. I asked some of my classmates about ways that they like to procrastinate. Someone said they like to eat junk food, donuts. Some said that they like to stress even more about the thing they're procrastinating about. Some of the personal ways that I procrastinate: my phone, because it's there, it's easy. Doing other chores, because I figure if I just do quick, easy things, a lot of them all at once, I don't have to do the really long, hard thing that I want to do. Doodling. Some people doodling helps. For me, I put all of my effort into it, and it means that I never get anything done. And then a personal low point in my status as a human being. On a Sunday night, the night before an essay was due, I spent 7.5 hours on BuzzFeed taking quizzes instead of writing an essay that I had yet to start. Never again, I promise. So now that we know why and how we procrastinate, why do we do it? Really? I mean, we know why we're afraid, but why is it so hard to stop procrastinating? All of these things have one thing in common. They're all about instant gratification of fear, or instant gratification of boredom. They all take away, for a moment, what is making us afraid, or what is boring us. Whenever I tell someone that I procrastinate, and I feel like it's hurting my capabilities to succeed, they always tell me knowing something is half the battle. Knowing that I procrastinate is half the battle. You're almost there, now you can fix it. I mean, that works when I realize that the reason why I trip is because my shoelace is untied. But that doesn't work well for me when I think about why I procrastinate. I think this past New Year's, I made a resolution for the 6th or 7th time that I was going to stop procrastinating. It still hasn't worked. It never works. Why does knowing not work? The reason why I think knowing doesn't work is because we're all playing a blame game. So what I mean by blame game is this. When something goes wrong, and we don't want to take responsibility for it, we play a blame game by shoving the blame off onto someone or something else. Blame games depend on the separation of the guilty party and the accused cause. For example, if I was sliding down the hallway in fluffy socks and I knocked over a vase, I would blame the vase accident on a dog. I'd say the dog did it because the dog's not me. The dog is the guilty party and I'm not. I'm separating myself away from it. I'm playing a blame game with myself. Aside from the fact that I don't actually have a dog, this can backfire in other ways. Playing a blame game depends on stepping out of the spotlight of responsibility. When we step into the spotlight, we're taking control and we are taking responsibility for the actions that we do. But there's a twist to that comes with procrastination, in that we have come to use procrastination. Instead of saying that it's an action that can be done, something that someone does, it slowly over time has become a way that we characterize ourselves. I asked you all at the beginning of this if you thought that you were a chronic procrastinator. I was asking you to see if you would characterize yourself as a procrastinator. And that's where the blame game comes in. By saying that you are a procrastinator, rather than saying that you procrastinate, you're stepping out of the spotlight of responsibility. And the reason why you're doing that is because by saying that you are a procrastinator, instead of taking responsibility for an action for procrastinating, you are instead stepping out of the spotlight and blaming your procrastination on a part of you that now seems to be inherent. The procrastinator within you is a separate part of yourself when you call yourself a procrastinator, and it's something that you can't stop. That's why it's so difficult to get rid of it, because most of all, this game is invisible to everybody else, but it's mostly invisible to the procrastinator themselves, because they don't realize that they're doing it to themselves. So now that you know why you're having trouble stopping procrastinating, what the invisible blame game is, how do you get out of it? How do you get back into that spotlight? We're going to have a little talk now. We're going to talk about how we stop procrastinating. Number 1, set goals. It'll feel great when you get things done. Number 2, give yourself incentives. Don't go cold turkey on fun. Number 3, use a planner. Keeping track of it will make it way easier to self-manage. That was horrendous. I hope I never have to do that again. So let's have a little fireside chat. I can't actually tell you guys how to get out of the invisible blame game. I can't do that for you because you are you, and you have your own ways that you'll motivate yourself. That hunky-dory stuff is so general that it never actually helps. Maybe it helps 1% of the time, but generally you have to find your own path. What I can tell you is this. Together, we need to start taking more responsibility and understanding the action of procrastination. How many of you said that you were chronic procrastinators again? Can you raise your hands again? Don't do that. It's a bad thing. Instead of characterizing yourself as a procrastinator, instead of going, oh, I'm the worst procrastinator, I do this all the time, stop saying that and rather take action for what you've done. You said, I put something off. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And then think back to those emotions of fear and boredom. And think about why you put that off. Understand what was making you do something that you knew you shouldn't be doing. By doing that, you're going to step yourself right back into the spotlight of responsibility. And once you're back in that spotlight, it's a little bit easier to get back on the track to stop yourself from procrastinating next time. Once you understand and take responsibility truly into the deepest core that you can. So that the next time you start procrastinating, you can ask yourself, who's really to blame? All right, thank you. Questions? All right, does anybody have any questions? All right. Yes.
Have you found yourself lessening or decreasing the amount that you procrastinate?
I think I have. I can't really tell. Every time I try to monitor how much I'm procrastinating, my brain kind of gets back into the whole invisible blame game thing. But I think after having realized this, I understand why I procrastinate better, and I think that's kind of helping me reduce procrastination.
What inspired you to talk about this subject?
I had a weekend back in October where I'd put off, I think, like 4 essays in one class, like for several classes, and I had to spend my entire weekend, which was the first weekend that I had free, doing all those essays, and I hated it, and it was the worst thing I'd ever had to do because it was the first time I'd been free in a long time. So it kind of got me thinking as to why I had gotten myself in that hole.
The main reason I procrastinate is because, we're all high schoolers, but we all have busy lives. Some of us are busier than other people. Even if we're not busy, we think we're busy, okay? It's a fact. But the problem is, sometimes you don't have time, but then there's a lot of times when you tell yourself you don't have time, even though you might. Last night, I had a debate I was supposed to do. I had to go take a shower. I had to get to bed. I just came home from work. I sat on the computer for an hour and did nothing. Complete waste of time when I could have been sleeping, and I could have been doing something else. So my main problem with procrastination is that I always tell myself I don't have enough time. Do you have a solution for that sort of train of thought?
I think that falls mostly under a division of interest, but it's kind of a weird twist on it. And you mentioned that. You say part of it is that we tell ourselves that we don't have enough time, and that's another characterization thing. Maybe that's another invisible blame game, is that we characterize ourselves as students who are busy all the time. We are busy people. And sometimes it can be true, but other times it can kind of get a little deeper into us. Maybe when we're not as busy as we think we are, we still think in our heads, I'm too busy for this. So maybe that's another aspect of the blame game.
Did you see anything in doing research and all that, if the amount of procrastination is just as much in the workforce as it is in high school or middle school students?
It's actually pretty prevalent in the workforce. It's not quite as large statistically, but there are trends that show that people who reported themselves to procrastinate regularly in high school tended to be more vulnerable to procrastination as they went into the workforce and became adults.